Okay. So the mainnet and the testnet, they're running the same versions as before. Nothing has changed over there. The work on block merge is continuing very nicely. I think we're probably in the last week of getting the getting block merge on the testnet. NetZipper demonstrated the working block merge last week. He is working on cleanup and some near-term or quick optimizations, and including creating some indices caches and looking at what can be improved. He has already added more spans to the Jaeger monitoring framework, so we can see where the performance issues are and what's going on. So he's doing the cleanup, and Will is beginning to work on fixing an issue with channel hashes. So that's something that's needed for us to get block merge on the testnet. So once all of this is done, also NetZipper is cleaning up or looking into some of the tests that are failing, and he's making the fixes necessary to make sure they all pass. So once it's all done, we should be able to have it on the testnet and then do another measure of how much of horizontal scaling we're getting with the increase in the nodes. By necessity at this time, we will only be doing that with a relatively small number of nodes, meaning maybe up to 30, 40 nodes. We're not going to be able to say what is the behavior going to be if you have hundreds or thousands of nodes. So that's something for the future when we get to that scale and that point. But for now, at least, we should be able to get some graphs relative to, let's say, less than 50 nodes, what the behavior is starting at 5 nodes, something like that. Because we're sort of limited in terms of what we could do with the existing resources in terms of how many nodes we can spin up and all that. So that's kind of where we are. But that's, again, we have not started on that activity. The team is still focused on just getting block merge completed and getting it ready for testnet. That's where we are. And then Gurinder was focused on, bringing consolidating the servers so that we're below the budget for current spend on the thing. But once we start using or simulating or emulating these multiple or large number of nodes, again, we'll run into some issues there, but we will handle that as we get to that. He's still looking into the issue on the mainnet that basically on a day-to-day basis, the number of deploys is going down by a slight amount. But then if we restart the network, it adjusts itself. So there's some kind of a memory or some other issue, but that's something that we're still continuing to work on. I talked about the hard forks last week, that there will be 2 of them. One just to get the bonds file updated, and the second one really with a lot more fixes that need to happen. So this last tech governance meeting last Thursday, we had a conversation with Raphael and others that might have, or that those that may need to consider any impact on what they're doing in terms of the data migration. Raphael confirmed that he can handle that as long as he gets maybe a day's notice or something about when we're going to do that. So that's done. And Tomislav is back from his vacation and has started working on the project, and he created a couple of projects. I think you still see my screen, right, with the project board right now. So this is the core team development activities that are going on, sort of like a Kanban board on that. And then this is the documentation activities that need to be done. I mean, they're in different stages of completion. But the reason I'm showing you this is I'm hoping that the community can help with some of these documentation tasks at least. Maybe sometimes it's just a matter of reviewing what is written there and making sure that that's indeed correct in your experience, such as, for example, starting our node locally and things like that. So please help out wherever you can on those two tasks. And Toby has created a very nice Rolang focused page. It's rchain-community.github.io. So this is his page. I mentioned last week that he has hooked up codesandbox.io so that you can run Rolang code directly from that. But here he tried to pull together the documentation that is currently available on Rolang and highlight some of the features and put put a few blurbs about how to go about that. And here are all the different links he's linking back to what was there before, and the wallets, etc. And then here is where you can start playing with it directly. So again, shout out to Toby. Thank you very much. It looks nice. And again, help out Toby by either doing pull requests or commenting to see how he can make this more useful for Rolang developers and potential newbies to RChain. So that's another piece. I mean, in general, the theme here is that we are getting to focus a little bit on the developer adoption and developer ease of using the platform, making sure that they have access to the necessary information and tools to get on the platform with in a painless manner. So those are some of the activities going on there. Let me see if there's anything new down below. So I think by and large, that's where it is. Raphael and Theo have done an update to the COVID passport application. I'm not sure, are they going to be demonstrating today? Does anyone know? And then NutZipper has written a nice article or update on block merge and how it works and why it's important. So that's, I think, all that I wanted to cover here. NutZipper, if you can put the link to your article in the chat, maybe that'll help. Are there any questions on any part of what I said? All right, over to you, Greg.
Very good. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm pleased that we have such good progress on the block merge. As always, there are lots of things we want to attend to. Software is never done, but we're happy to make progress. So the work on the COVID passport is has crossed another milestone. So they demonstrated that to the board, and we've approved the work. So very happy to that work done. It's very nice work, very impressive. And I think it's a good model, where the board specifically puts out a bounty for a specific project, and community members step up, and then there's a review process with the board. We were trying to scale that previously with the bounty program, but that just did not work. So at least for the time being, a board review is probably what's necessary to ensure the quality of the work. Any questions or comments about that? All right, Daryl, are you ready for the community in review?
Yep. Okay, here we go for Thursday, February 11th to today, February 17th. Last Thursday, there was no governance committee meeting because the issues were already covered in the earlier tech governance call. On Thursday, the DApp developer working group worked on identity wallet fixes live coding. On Friday, in the climate coordination call, we discussed climate change and pandemics. Shell's announcement that it has hit peak oil. Greg explained how RChain scales as you add hardware, and he discussed RChain and multi-chains. On Monday, in the Casper stand-up, they covered the basics of the parsimonious lambda calculus. This is the tool we will use to get ZK snarks into Rolang. On Tuesday, in the RChain education call, considered alternative token implementations on RChain. And also yesterday in the communications working group, we discussed the new academic research page on the RChain.coop website that Ian's been working on, Steve Henley and Raphael's 5 new articles. We went over suggestions for the proposed changes to the white paper, the process for the new PR videos, and how to catch the new re-rating wave. And this morning at the members hangout, they talked about Nutzipper's recent article on block merge, and Raphael and Theo discussed file name resolution in DAPI. The need for RChain tokens to support escrow was discussed, and ERC 1559 token economics conceptual relevance to RChain's monetary policy. And that brings us to now.
Awesome. Thank you, Daryl. Any questions for Daryl? All right. We are in the process of working on a video, actually a series of videos, and we're going to include graphic support. We may ultimately do some animated videos on the basis of this, but I'm very happy to say that we're starting to get the sort of style, sort of toned down, spare style that I think will be appropriate for these videos. So I will just do a quick screen share so people can get a taste of what we're talking about. So in the first video, what we want to do is, visualize or actually have graphic aids while Daryl and I are conversing. But the graphic aids are going to help us visualize adding nodes to a network, right? So you've got a network of servers, and on those servers you have various assignments of nodes, servers, and then as people start adding resources, servers to the network, and then nodes on top of those, the question is what happens to the throughput of the network? And the general answer, this general framework of questions is one that I think that blockchain investors really need to be aware of as they're thinking about putting money into projects. Because if the answer is that as you add hardware to the network, it doesn't get faster, or worse, it gets slower, that's a anti-scaling property. I mean, it's really the wrong direction. Part of what we've been doing with block merge is to ensure that the promise of the RChain architecture is fulfilled, so that as you add resources to the network, it gets faster. That is the way scaling has been done now for decades. You throw more hardware at the problem. As opposed to like trying to make your code, that much faster. So if the architecture doesn't support, throwing more hardware at the problem to make it scale, then something's wrong, because it's completely out of alignment with the way we've been scaling for the last many decades. Likewise, as you start adding more smart contracts, to the network, as you start deploying more and more stuff, what happens, and specifically, what happens since these smart contracts are written by external parties, right? Not necessarily core dev or blessed developers, but just any old developer out there in the wide woolly internet. Then they're going to introduce bugs. And the question is, what happens to the network as you introduce these bugs? I mean, if the answer is that, tens or if not hundreds of millions of dollars can be drained from the network, then that's not a very secure network. And if the answer to that is, well, you just have to do audits, that's also not a very secure network. So it's not okay to make the network faster without having an answer to this security problem. All right, and so the behavioral types, the spatial behavioral types, are one of our answers, and a very central one to the kind of security issues that will happen. So again, the basic premise is that once you have, a blockchain 3.0 architecture where you add more hardware and it scales, that means you can start running transactions, in the tens of thousands per second. But if you can run transactions in the tens of thousands per second, if someone introduces a bug in a smart contract that could drain, millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, then in a second you could exhaust the network of its financial resources, right? So the faster it goes, the more egregious those kinds of bugs become, and so you have to have an answer to those kinds of bugs, and that's where the spatial behavioral types come into play. So that's basically the story, and we're starting to accumulate the graphics. Again, this is just a very initial storyboard, but we're trying to nail down the style and the approach to telling the story. I'd love to have comments, feedback, questions.
Well, I think this is very exciting, and I can't wait to see what everyone comes up with. But I just think, I know this is just kind of an initial sort of demo version, but I think adding color to the images will be easier to understand and to read.
Okay.
Personally, I feel.
Okay. All right. That's good feedback.
I think if the blocks, like if it's just basically like black and white, I think that's a more difficult image to understand than if there's color. And it doesn't need to be necessarily like color coordinated, like this color means this and that color means that. But I just think that adding color might help a little.
Okay, well that's good feedback. Thank you. That's counterintuitive to me, so it's great to have this perspective. Anyone else have any thoughts along those lines or any other lines?
Yes, I think it would be also worth explaining the mechanism where not the whole network does not have to execute all the transactions, and you can have just a subset that execute transactions and then give a proof of execution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can do that as well. Yeah, we're trying to segment these stories into little bite-sized pieces. The more we stuff into a story, the more we're likely to lose our audience. So what I'm attempting to do is to create a sort of neutral, a somewhat neutral set of videos, blockchain neutral, in the sense that the advice we're giving to people could be used to evaluate any blockchain, not just RChain. And so as an investor, if you reason through these basic queries and questions, then you should be able to figure out where your money is going to have the most long-term impact and the most, it's going to be at less risk. So that's kind of one market segment that I think is going to be, critical. And it's a real service. If we can help people evaluate for themselves where they want to put their money, then I think that would, it would fill a niche that I think is missing in the existing blockchain hype marketing machine.
I had just one more comment.
Uh-huh.
I just think if this is going to be it sounds like what you're saying is this is going to maybe be a series of videos, like just a string of them. And if that is the case, I think that's great. But I think it should be really important that however they are disseminated or uploaded on the internet, I feel that it's important that if somebody finds one of them, it's easy for them to find the others so that they're not all kind of just astray. Maybe there could be a place on the website or the blog where all of these videos, once the series is completed, as people can watch them all back to back if they want. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. So that's the plan. So the place where they'll go is RChain's YouTube channel, and then they'll go in as a playlist. So if you go to the YouTube channel,
that's great.
you'll see one of them, and then you'll notice that it's a part of a playlist, and you can go to the playlist and play the rest of them.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
And yes, of course, Theo, good point. We are not financial advisors. These are more about technical. Yeah. Series name, video name. Good. That's also excellent feedback. Yep.
Make sure to use different thumbnails for videos, because if you go to RChain's like video library, there's a lot of videos with the same thumbnail. It's hard to know which one is which. You're gonna need to check the number.
Yeah. Good point. So, that's a very good point. Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah, and just like on Twitter, you can put 1 of 8, 2 of 8, whatever, so it's more clear. But I think the thumbnails is an important thing too.
Okay. Excellent. That's also useful. Very good. Okay. Anything else, Rao, Daryl, Steve, that I forgot to mention?
No, I can't think of anything.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks to all. There are some nice positive updates for the Friday session, very specific updates that I'm happy to be finally bringing to rest. So I hope that people will join us on the Friday call. I think Gurinder has a topic he wants to mention on the Friday call. I don't know that it really has to be closed door. Gurinder, now that we're here, I think the point you were making about trying to get our climate change message aligned with what's happening to the power grid in the South right now, and with these other climate change situations that are making this come to the forefront of people's attention. I think you're absolutely right. The question is, what's the most effective way to do that, and exactly who our audiences are as we begin to craft those messages. Did you have any other thoughts, Gurinder? I mean, certainly we can have a more detailed nuanced conversation in the Friday call, but I think, this is all good, community discussion.
I mean, I guess there's a wealth of information that the team has gathered over the time frame discussing the climate change and RChain relationship. So what I was suggesting is that we should probably extract that information, put it in some nice summary, and publish it as to what RChain can do to help the current crisis, if it's not directly in a sense of infrastructure upgrades and all, or at minimum in the communication aspects that we spoke about earlier today. So whatever that piece of information and discussions that we've had in the past, if you're able to collect that and say, okay, here is where RChain is positioned to help, not only long-term, but even in a short-term period. I was thinking if you're able to do that, then at least it puts RChain on the radar map for a lot of people who have climate change has become all of a sudden a major issue that they maybe in the past have been ignoring, and the impact of climate change on the current infrastructure, how that our infrastructure is not capable of handling some of those changes coming up, and policymakers who have just been ignoring it. All of that if we can take that summary, and that's basically the discussion I wanted to just have on the Friday call.
Yeah. I think, we certainly can. I think that it would be good to have a more detailed discussion there. I mean, one of the things that I think is important to, it's an example of what's happening in the media now, and the way that the media is framing the problem, framing the narrative. Bill Gates was recently interviewed on 60 Minutes and talking about his climate change book and some of the work that he's done towards climate change. And one of the things that I think is really important in terms of that interview is that he states, in using exactly the same words that I've been using in public forums since 2016, that our approaching climate change is going to require coordination at a scope and scale that we have never seen in the history of humanity. So he likened it to, the kind of coordination that happened in a world war. But it's more intense than that. It's going to require a bigger scope and scale with respect to coordination. But then in the follow-up discussion, he doesn't talk about technology for supporting coordination. He only talks about technology, sort of the hard technologies, like sequestering carbon in the ground, or changing the way we work with the built environment in terms of manufacturing steel, or changing the kind of our use of meat, our dietary practices. Those are all things where Bill has put money and helped people who have projects aimed at helping to reduce our carbon footprint. But he explicitly did not talk about any sort of technological support for coordination. And yet, at the outset of the discussion on the 60 Minutes interview, he points out that it's going to require global coordination at a scale that we have never done before in the history of humanity. And so one would think that, there should be some technological support for that kind of coordination. I mean, to me, that seems logical. And so I think what we're going to have to do is to help people understand how much of a coordination problem climate change is and the role that blockchain will play in that coordination. So that's the challenge in front of us. Does that make sense? When I speak like that, is that landing with people?
I think it makes total sense. And I really enjoyed that interview. And I'm sure I was about the 10th person to send it to you when I saw it. But I also felt, in addition to what you said about the lack of addressing technology's ability to help people coordinate, I also felt that it was missing from the discussion the indigenous solutions, the rewilding, reforesting, protecting land, things like that. I felt it was really all about basically carbon sequestration technology and other related technologies, but I wish that they had talked a little bit more about conservation, because that is also a very big piece of it. But I think those three kind of pieces together, the coordination with the technology and conservation, I think those are kind of the three key ones to me. So that's what I heard.
Yeah.
I would just say to Gurinder's point, just the idea of kind of consolidating all the materials that we've been developing all this time. To me, like there is I think we're arriving at a moment where we're going to be able to start to connect two kind of disconnects that have always made it kind of difficult to explain to people about RChain and our goals of confronting the global coordination problem. And that is that we don't really have an ecosystem, a big ecosystem to kind of speak about. So we can only kind of talk about it in more abstract terms. We can go, oh, this is what someone could do once they can, get onto mainnet and utilize RChain, but we're not actually showing the things that are being done. So my goal in the next little while is to start to reach out to actual blockchain companies that are actually developing things for climate change. And my go-to source right now is the Climate Chain Coalition, which is founded by this guy named Tom Bauman. And so my goal is to try to kind of start cold calling these many blockchain initiatives that are out there, and try to kind of convince them to start building for RChain, to kind of connect that disconnect. So then when we talk about RChain, we can say, RChain has this concurrent model that is unsurpassed, yada yada, and these are the projects that are building on it. I think once we can create that connection, then things will really open up. I don't know if that at all is close to what you're talking about, Gurinder, but that's where my head has been at.
Yes. I mean, I think both, in a sense that, my thought was that, we've had these discussions for a while on the Friday calls for RChain and climate change. And I thought there must be a wealth of information that we could quickly summarize and publish. That's where I was basically coming from. I mean, I've been pretty frustrated, like I think many people on this call, that the policymakers have not taken a lot of these issues around climate change very seriously, especially in the Western world, because I think Western world tend to be rich and they can afford to get around some of the immediate concerns very quickly. But whereas people, and maybe in Houston and Florida or California, if the oceans are rising, they can move inland. But people in Bangladesh and some of the other countries, poor countries, that option is not there. So that has, I think, for the rich countries, has not been a priority until things like what has happened in the South America, United States just recently, sort of like maybe hopefully hitting on the head and saying, hey, this is going to hit us and it's going to cost us a lot and it's going to create a lot of problems. So let's take this a little more seriously than we have been doing it in the past. So, you know, thinking that, you know, as I said, you know, as iron is hot. Yeah. So let's just strike it with some of the, you know, contributions that we have in the past talked about, and publish that somewhere.
I suggest you know, the elephant in the room here is really that the centralized systems are corrupt and nobody knows how to do decentralized coordination and control.
Yep. Yep. I think that is a very fair statement. Of course, you know, if you're someone that is saying the centralized systems are corrupt, you're not going to get a slot on 60 Minutes, even though, you know, we just watched the Republican Party quit Donald Trump. You know, and I'm not afraid to say that on a community meeting, even though it's a political statement, because, you know, even Mitch McConnell, you know, stood up and said Donald Trump is responsible for inciting the riot. So I feel like it's widely acknowledged that that's the case. And so even though the Republican Party remains unable to take you know, to take accountability seriously, you don't get a slot in the mainstream media if you talk about how corrupt the centralized systems are. I think you have to take it a different tack. You know, to quote Daryl, we have to sort of take the Buckminster Fuller approach, where we continue to offer compelling alternatives. I think, for example, our vote 2020 is a very compelling alternative to the kind of debacle that we witnessed with the existing electoral system here in the US. Likewise, I think that the COVID passport offers a compelling solution to the problems facing people who want to travel, or people who want to, you know, make use of public spaces, and so on and so forth. So, and I think we just have to continue to offer compelling solutions and help people understand these solutions are coordination solutions, and they were built in a decentralized manner on a decentralized technology. But I think that discussion just takes a long time for the penny to drop. But I'm open. Go ahead.
And you know, historically, decentralized governance hasn't worked, and
yes,
people are not confident that it ever will work.
But that's also true.
I think it works pretty well. I mean, even just looking at the United States, I mean, there are things, just having state government, federal government, even though there are a lot of problems and duplication, it does make for a more resilient system. So I wouldn't say decentralized governance is all a failure. Another point,
I'm not talking about a hierarchical top-down system. The United States government is pretty much hierarchical top-down. I mean, it does have 3 branches, but I'm talking about bottom-up organization of people cooperating in groups.
Yes, yes, I totally understand what you're saying.
Another point to, I mean, you're saying the corruption in our systems. Well, besides corruption, now we have, you know, unprecedented hacking. If you look at even the same 60 Minutes episode that you referred to with Bill Gates, there's a big piece on the SolarWinds hack, which is still ongoing and vast. So more arguments for blockchain, more secure systems.
Agreed.
more trusted, immutable records.
Yep. I think that there's my sense is that the discourse just takes a long time. Like a year ago, I was trying to get the Chinese community to understand how much the market is going to shift towards climate change. And they were asking me, well, yeah, but what has RChain got to do with climate change? Really, tell us what really. And we have been telling the climate and coordination story in public since 2016. But, it takes someone like Bill Gates saying climate change is going to require a world war level of coordination before we can, in order to meet the challenge. And it takes that kind of communication event before people hear the story. Oh, climate change is about coordination.
So what I'm curious about is that I think Texas is home to the largest Bitcoin mines, and I wonder what happened to them now without the power.
It's an interesting question. I imagine they probably have backup generators. Okay. Well, the exciting discussion. It's really nice to see some energy in these community meetups. Thanks to all for your time. Please stay safe, and I'm sure I'll see many of you on Friday.